Boobyalla as an area has always fascinated me. From 1973, when I first flew along the coast, I was taken by the contrasting vistas of blue seas, brilliant white sand and amazing patterns created by nature. In summer, there was the contrast between sea, sand and brown paddocks. Even from the air, it seemed an inhospitable environment. A huge sandbar across the Ringarooma River mouth virtually cut off any entrance from the sea, while on the horizon the jagged seven peaks of Mount Cameron were seen. This was an ever-changing landscape, as the forces of nature, wind, river currents and waves pushed and pulled the river and its channel in so many directions and shapes. Up the river, I was to learn about a place once called Ringarooma and then Boobyalla. Bass and Flinders were the first Europeans to visit this coastline in 1798. They sailed along the coast but missed seeing the mouth of the Ringarooma River. In 1798 this was the homeland of the northeast clan of Tasmanian Aborigines, but Flinders did not record seeing people here. In 1816, Captain Kelly certainly saw Tasmanian Aborigines in this area. He even stopped and asked Aboriginal women to help him catch seals. He tactfully refused to get involved in some local interclan warfare, and was one of the first to record the name Ringarooma, which he attributed as a Tasmanian Aboriginal name. The next explorer to visit was Thomas Hobbes, who in 1824 sailed and walked along the northeast coast, recording the wildlife and vegetation. The boats being repaired and painted, I left Georgetown on the 31st of May 1824 and proceeded to Pipers River. On the 20th of June, I arrived at one of the finest freshwater rivers I ever saw in this part of the country near Cape Portland. Its banks are high and open into exceedingly fine land. Flats extend from it on both sides for a considerable distance and are about 5 miles in length without hardly a tree. This land produces the greatest abundance of the best grass, together with plantain leaf, of which sheep are so fond. After such a glowing report on the suitability of the land around the Ringarooma River for sheep, it was no surprise that in 1826 the first attempt at a new settlement was undertaken, with tragic consequences. On the arrival of the post from Launceston on Thursday, a sudden gloom was thrown over the town by the distressing news of the total loss of the schooner Sally, which our readers will recollect sailed lately from this port with goods and passengers belonging to the settlers who were about to fix themselves on the banks of the Ringarooma River. The people now flew to the rigging, and everyone looked out for himself. I tried to save the eldest child of the blacksmith, but was washed away, and only saved myself by catching a rope. I felt for the little girl, but alas, I never heard her voice again. I now clung to the mast with both arms, and was obliged with others to be the witness of the poor mother and infant swimming about on the deck without the power of assistance in the least. Apprehensions being entertained at Launceston for the safety of Mr. Cleve and his party, who had gone down for the remains of the wreck of the Sally, Captain Welsh came to anchor, the wind being contrary, and dispatched his mate with a boat to Ringarooma River, where he found the party safe. They had loaded the schooner Helen with all that could be collected, and were waiting for a fair wind to come out. The remains of Mrs. Willett and one of her little children had been washed on shore, and were duly interred on the beach, a few pieces of the wreck being set up to mark the melancholy spot. So ended the first attempt to settle the Boobyalla area in 1826. This map by Hurst, dated 1827, shows a few coastal features but no settlements. In 1829, Henry Widdowson, one of the 10 survivors of the wreck of the Sally, published a book in England describing the agricultural potential of Van Diemen's Land. He describes the land around the Ringarooma River. The Ringarooma River opens into the sea at the extremity of a deep bay, and like most of the rivers in Van Diemen's Land, has a bar at its entrance. Yet small vessels could easily get over at flood tide. The mouth of the river gradually opened into one of the most beautiful basins I ever saw. This fine sheet of water appeared the rendezvous of hundreds of black swans, wild ducks and pelicans. The surrounding banks were covered with cherry tree and other small shrubs. Altogether, it had much the appearance of a piece of water formed to adorn the park of some of our nobles in England. Proceeding one day's journey up the river, about 30 miles, the land on each side for some distance appeared to be very good, but as it was evidently below the level of the river, I fear it would be inundated throughout the winter. In 1829, Thomas Lewis explored the northeast quarter of Tasmania. Lewis's map named the rivers and coastal features Duck River and Serpentine River. Other features had been named by previous explorers. A few faint names are noted at various locations, including the Andersons, A.W. Horn, Simeon Lord, Samuel McKee, Samuel Reeves. His naming of new geographical features, such as the rivers, was ignored. Between October and June 1831, George Augustus Robinson explored the area between Bridport and Cape Portland, searching for the remaining Tasmanian Aborigines. He travelled with a number of natives, including native chief Mena Lagana. He saw emus, climbed Mount Cameron and named the Boobyalla River. He did not record any European settlers living in this area, but ex-sealers were observed. A sketch of the Ringarooma estuary and Mount Cameron in 1836 by William Dawson, surveyor. He had been along this coast surveying the first land grants allocated in the 1830s. These were largely sheep stations run by ex-convicts, for the owners such as the Foster, Brown, Groves, Hardwick and Williams families. This is a view of the area and Dawson sketch of 1836 as it was in 2022. This map shows the location of the first occupiers of land at the Ringarooma and Boobyalla rivers. Originally a grant to A.W. Horn, but soon taken over by William Henry Brown's overseer. It also shows an area reserved for a township called Ringarooma. William Henry Brown was born on the 20th of August 1800 in Mallow, County Cork, Ireland. He arrived in Van Diemen's Land in 1828. His duties were onerous, requiring a man of prodigious physical energy and stamina. Each week he held 3 services on Sunday and 1 on Wednesday at St John's, and conducted services at the jail, penitentiary and hospital. His duties also include inspecting the government schools at Launceston and Georgetown. With all Reverend Brown's commitments in Launceston and Georgetown, he would have had few opportunities to visit this property. In 1843, it was overseen by E.C. Bowen. Today, the old homestead is covered by hundreds of tons of wind-blown sand. This 1861 survey map by Hurst shows tracks to the river, but no buildings. This 1850s map of northeast Tasmania uses information from various sources, including a maritime survey by HMS Beagle by Commander J.L. Stokes, 1839-43. It shows part of the old coast road from Georgetown to Cape Portland, and the location of future settlements, most of which never developed. Many of these names came from places along the Dorset coast in England. The 1842 census reports the following people occupying or owning land at Ringarooma Boobyalla: E.C. Bowen, householder. Reverend Dr. Brown, owner. Later owned by William Abbott in 1845. John Foster, John Taylor, owner of 3 blocks on the western side of the river. Other people mentioned in the 1843 include Bowen, 16 people including 14 males and 2 females. At this time there were a number of small dwellings occupied by ex-convicts who were shepherds. In the early days, most of these properties were running sheep. After shearing, wool was sent to Launceston or Georgetown by boat or bullock wagon. In 1874, Donald Campbell and Renison Bell were the first to discover tin at Boobyalla. This led to a rush of miners to the district. The tin bonanza had started, and Boobyalla became a gateway to and from the mines. Passing over the Boobyalla Bridge, turning to the left and going down to the surveyed township of Ringarooma, we come to the Ringarooma Hotel, the only building on the township kept by Mr. J.T. Smith. He has a store and teams on the road, carting stores up and or down from the mines. The post office is here, and the mailman rides across the river to Mr. Bowen's station at Cape Portland. Mr. J.T. Smith has obtained a jetty right from the Minister of Lands and intends, as soon as he can secure skilled labour, to erect a jetty and lay down a tramway to his store on the bank above. In 1876, over 2,000 bags of tin had been shipped from Boobyalla in just 2 weeks. In some cases, steamers were forced to transfer part of their cargo to other vessels in order to get out of the harbour. There are often long delays, and passengers were sometimes forced to walk back to Georgetown or even Launceston. In a newspaper report of 1883, looking inward from the sea at the cluster of weather-beaten wooden houses, built regardless of township rules, only a short distance from the sandy bed of the river, one is inclined to wonder what manner of people these may be who build houses on such a sandy, barren reach, forgetting even to clear the bushes and grass from around their dwellings. There are 2 hotels in the place, a blacksmith shop and a telegraph and post office in someone's backyard, and a place of worship, which is never used. There is no general store or shop of any kind. The population consists principally of women, children and goats, with a great percentage of the latter. The masculine portion of the community are migratory, their habits with a tendency to pugilism. Boobyalla boasts of a racecourse in summer. In the winter it is a swamp. I had the pleasure of witnessing a race or 2 there. The spectators consist principally of men, dogs and cart horses, the latter indulging in a race of their own accord, taking care to cross the course of their trained relatives as often as possible. Should a female arrive, she is closely scrutinised and criticised by members of her own sex. Some opinion she has come in search of a runaway husband. Others think she's come in hope of securing one of any sort. Should she be going further than Boobyalla, there is much chafing amongst the drivers of the different teams as to who will have the task of taking her to a destination. The one item of interest is the arrival of the steamer each week, which causes quite a stir amongst the inhabitants. Donald Campbell has also built a wharf and a hotel, the Caledonian of Boobyalla, and he was the harbour master for the port. By 1888, the township blocks have been surveyed, and it shows the coast road to Cape Portland. Property owners included Donald Campbell, Elizabeth Campbell, William Ritchie, Isaac Dorr, B. Shaw and Hugh Gillam. A later 89 map of Boobyalla shows the bridge over the Ringarum River from Boobyalla to Cape Portland, and blocks surveyed for William Ritchie and John Parker. Some of these blocks were speculatory, though shepherds did occupy some living in small huts. This valuable photograph, probably taken in the 1880s, shows some of the locals, including Donald Campbell, George Groves Sr., the Dawes family, and George Lyle the blacksmith. This photograph shows a North East field naturalist at the site of the Caledonian Hotel in the year 2007, standing in the same position as those in the previous photograph. Boobyalla Port was always plagued by a shallow, winding estuary. In 1893, SS Minx was stranded in the river for over 3 months, and after leaving, sank off Waterhouse Island, possibly because of leaks caused by the stranding. This 1901 survey map of the Ringarum River by geologist Rabeck shows landowners at Boobyalla, and a shaded area that would be covered by floodwaters. This area has not been covered by mine tailings, and it is still free today. The map indicates large areas owned or leased by William Thomas Morgan, who was living at Boobyalla in 1901. October 1918, a motor party from Hobart, including a well-known solicitor and two, visits Boobyalla. The car found a bog, but after an hour or two of rope pulling, it sped merrily on its homeward track. Boobyalla about 1920, showing the old Caledonian Hotel. The wharf and storage shed was moved to Winlear as a barn. The wooden decking added to the concrete wharf was still intact. The old Caledonian Hotel and Donald Campbell's homes were lost to fires in the 1950s, but we do have a record of who lived in the old homestead. Here we can see where members of the family lived: the old post office room, Donald Campbell's den, and the room used by Mary Herring, a woman adopted by the Campbells, who gives us an interesting insight into life at Boobyalla in the 1920s. The Campbell family consisted of parents Donald and Elizabeth, his wife, who was a member of the Bowen family, also sons Jack and Angus, and daughters Flo, Blanche, Edith and Grace. Only 2 unmarried women, Flo and Blanche, lived at their parents' home, which is then at Boobyalla. I always rode astride, but the Campbell girls rode side saddle. Their old saddles were still beautiful, with elaborate stitching. They are much older than I was, and rather prim and proper and formal when visiting. Even in that isolated district, they were particular about visiting cards. All the Campbell children, both girls and boys, were taught by governesses, Miss Jessie Keddy and Miss May Rowbottom. The girls were taught music and painting, as were all young ladies in those days. My life with the Campbells at Kildare was busy but happy. Mr. Campbell used to play the fiddle for us during the evenings, and when there were dances too. He was a fine old gentleman who, even at his life's end, was able to recite Latin verses learned at his Highland school. Donald Campbell was a Roman Catholic. He built a small church on the home paddock. It was struck by lightning and burned to the ground the night Edith died giving birth to a son. On the 1st of January 1914, a heavy thunderstorm accompanied by vivid forked lightning passed over Boobyalla. During the height of the storm, the old Roman Catholic church, situated about 80 yards from the post office, was struck by lightning, and in less than 20 minutes was a smoking heap of ruins. When a baby was born into the Campbell or Bowen family, Mr. Campbell would saddle up his thoroughbred horse and ride to Scottsdale for Mrs. Cunningham, a midwife. She would strap her own baby on her back and ride her horse up the coast to help the new baby into the world, a distance of about 40 kilometres. This recently discovered photograph of Boobyalla, taken about 1910, is the best one we have. Before the railway came to Herrick in 1916, and with an increased interest in mining around Gladstone and Mount Cameron, the port of Boobyalla showed an increase in trade for a short time. Donald Campbell was still living in the old Caledonian Hotel as his residence. New sheds and a wooden jetty extension allowed shipping access despite the silting up of the river from wind-blown sand. You can just make out cattle and horses being loaded and unloaded from the steamer. Today there are only a few relics of the past at Boobyalla. Campbell's concrete wharf and a shipping post can be seen. The river no longer reaches the jetty due to a build-up of sand. The other long-term inhabitants of Boobyalla were the Morgan family. Captain Morgan was about 60 when he came to Boobyalla. He had previously lived in Hobart. He had sailed with Sir John Franklin, who was Lieutenant Governor of Tasmania between 1837 and 43. His children, Kate and William, were born in Hobart. The Morgans leased large areas of the northeast, as well as purchasing over 1,000 acres in various locations. William Morgan became a councillor on the Ringarooma Council in 1908. Neither he or his sister Kate married. They both died in January 1938, within 11 days of each other. This is the Morgans' homestead on the banks of the Boobyalla River in 1909, with the peaks of Mount Cameron in the background. In 2019, this photograph was taken from the same location. I regularly visited the site of the Morgans' homestead between 1980 and 2005 as part of the Scottsdale High School survival camp. It was an opportunity to introduce local history of a largely unknown part of the northeast to students. Sadly today, it is difficult to reach this location as the bridge on the Old Coast Road has been burnt down. Death being the end of us all, we will end this sketch by a brief glance at the silent City of the Dead. It is a short distance from the township on the Gladstone Road. I have walked in many cemeteries, but none have called forth such solemn thoughts as these, in many cases untended graves. No white rail fence divided them from the grazing land. No gravel paths were there, or lofty monuments with long inscriptions to tell the travellers who lay beneath. Only a few mounds, 2 or 3 railed in, all half hidden by native grasses and overshadowed by trees. No sound broken upon the ear, not a bird fluttered in the trees. A few goats and a solitary horse cropped the herbage a short distance away, and the mark of their hooves was plainly visible on the grave. As silent and saddened, I turned back to the habitations of the living. Fortunately today, thanks to the Scottsdale Rotary Club, the cemetery has been rejuvenated and protected for posterity, because here lie the remains of past and recent pioneers of the district. The Morgans and Campbells are joined by the recent memorials to the Farquhar family, and the tragic memorial to Bert's only son John, who drowned in nearby Bluey's Lagoon.